She saved a stranger on the road, and it took her life in a direction she never imagined. The story began on a storm-drenched highway just outside the quiet coastal town of Bella Rosa. The wind carried an ocean chill, the kind that bit at exposed skin, shook trembling fingers, and turned calm nights into restless ones. But Alina Russo had never been afraid of storms. What frightened her, though she never admitted it aloud, was the silence that followed heartbreak. The night this tale begins, Alina was driving back from the late shift at the Bella Rosa General Hospital, her car the only moving silhouette between dark forests and endless stretches of slippery asphalt. At that moment, nothing remarkable was supposed to happen. Nothing extraordinary was expected. It was an ordinary night. Tired eyes behind the wheel, lukewarm coffee in a cup holder, and an early morning alarm waiting only a few hours away. But love stories never begin where we expect them to. A sudden flash of lightning revealed what darkness had been hiding. An overturned motorbike crushed against a roadside railing, metal twisted like broken ribs, wheels still spinning lazily in the rain. Beneath the railing, half collapsed against wet stone, was a man. Blood streaked down his face and blended instantly into the water dripping from his hair. His body was motionless, too motionless. In a single breath, Alina's heart snapped awake. She didn't think, didn't hesitate, didn't weigh consequences. She pulled the car over, the tires skidding slightly before settling onto mud-soft ground. The storm roared as she bolted out, coat forgotten, umbrella irrelevant. Some people call these moments instinct. Others call them fate taking its first step. She fell to her knees beside the man, drying rain and blood with her bare palm, whispering urgently, "Sir, can you hear me?" No response. Not a pulse spoken in movement, not a flicker of awareness. She leaned in, checking his breathing. Extremely faint, a fragile whisper of survival. "Please don't die on me," she murmured, voice cracking under thunder. She pressed her fingers to his neck and detected a pulse, slow but present. "Thank God," she exhaled, her breath visible in the cold slipstream of wind. Sirens were too far, the town was too distant, the night was too unforgiving. She needed to act now. With unbelievable effort, she dragged him to the car, his limp weight heavier than his lean frame suggested, heavier because unconscious bodies carry the stillness of surrender. She pushed him carefully into the back seat and grabbed her emergency medical kit, something every doctor, especially a tired one who has seen too much life slip through her hands, carries in her trunk. She patched his head wound while the rain beat violently against the windows. His face was beautiful in a rugged, pained way. Sharp jaw, dark brows, thick lashes glued together by rain, or tears, or both. He was the kind of man you look at twice without knowing why. The kind of face that suggests a story before a name. Alina acted with clinical precision, cleaning, pressing, wrapping, sewing his injuries into temporary safety. She whispered through every step, not to calm him, but maybe to calm herself. "You're going to live. You hear me? You're going to live." The drive to the hospital was urgent and eerily quiet despite the storm. She kept checking the rearview mirror. Still unconscious, still breathing, still alive. Barely. When they arrived at the Bella Rosa emergency entrance, Alina immediately summoned nurses. "Bring a stretcher, now." Few people questioned her authority there. No one wanted to. Doctors who command chaos with certainty rarely need to explain themselves. The nurses rushed him inside. The moment his body left her back seat, the rainwater that soaked him stained the car fabric, but Alina didn't care. She cared about one thing only, that he survived. Hours later, after performing emergency surgery with her colleagues, Alina stepped out of the operating room exhausted, numbed, emotionally drained, yet victorious. The man was stabilized, out of danger, recovering. She thought the story ended there. She had no idea. That night, she had saved more than a life. She had saved the heir to a mafia empire. Lorenzo De Luca, the Mafia Prince of the De Luca dynasty, the future ruler of the Southern syndicates, and a man no ordinary person crossed paths with unless the universe wanted more than coincidence. But Alina didn't know his name yet. Not tonight, not tomorrow, and maybe not until her heart was already tangled beyond rescue. The next day began like a page that turns gently after tragedy. Blue skies blotting away storm gray, sunlight warming rooftops, hospital corridors buzzing normally again. Alina had not slept. She was running on adrenaline dissolving into weary pride. She made her rounds mechanically, until curiosity nudged her steps toward one specific recovery room, room 308, the man she saved. He was awake now. When she entered, he was sitting upright on the hospital bed, bandages wrapped around his head and wrist, his posture surprisingly controlled for someone who fought death only hours ago. His clothes had been replaced with the standard hospital gown, yet he carried himself with the quiet dignity of someone who has never had to shrink for anyone's attention. His eyes lifted slowly toward her, and the world, for one moment, held still. They were dark, emotion-filled, sharp and warm in a way that suggested he was a man who felt everything deeply, even when he spoke nothing. His gaze carried gratitude, but also confusion. She smiled gently. "Good morning. I see you finally decided to wake up." His lips twitched into a faint smile, not playful yet, but present. "Did you save me?" She stepped closer, crossing her arms lightly, not defensively, just habitually. "I did, on the road." His eyes dropped, absorbing, remembering fragments. "I owe you my life." Alina waved a dismissive hand. "You don't owe me anything, just don't ride motorcycles in storms." He chuckled softly, deep, quiet, sincere. "Noted, doctor." She frowned slightly. "You know I'm a doctor?" He tapped the visible name tag clipped to her coat. Alina Russo, MD. She paused. "You read a lot for a dying man." His smile returned, just slightly wider this time. "Only for the woman who saved me." Her cheeks warmed despite herself, and she quickly diverted, moving into professional mode. "Vitals look good, blood pressure stable. You'll live." He already knows. "Because you said I would." The memory rushed back to her, rain-soaked whispers over his pulse. She had told him he would live. She didn't think he heard it, but he had. Their eyes locked again. Alina felt the shift, something fragile realigning inside her chest. Lorenzo leaned forward slightly. "Why did you help me?" "That's a strange question. You were dying. But you didn't know me. I could have been anyone. You were someone who needed help. What if I was dangerous?" he asked quietly. Alina didn't look away. "I would have saved you anyway." That was the moment. If destiny needed a signature line, it got one. Lorenzo stared at her for a long moment, then murmured something soft and earnest. "Then you're braver than anyone I've met." She smiled, a gentle but tired smile that carried the weight of someone who saves lives, but hasn't yet saved her own heart. "And you talk more than most men on hospital beds." Lorenzo relaxed slightly. "Maybe near death I found my voice." She laughed, soft, real, melodic. "Well, I think the storm washed it in." Days passed, and every day she returned to his room, not always as his doctor, sometimes just as herself. They talked about flowers, about storms, about family, about destiny. He never revealed his truth, and she never pressed for it. Their bond was warm, gentle, slow, unexplainable. The kind that grows quietly between conversations, like vines curling along the cracks of an old wall. Lorenzo was mysterious, calm, reserved, intense and soft at the same time, but safe, respectful, kind. The hospital staff liked him. They trusted Alina.
and they trusted the quiet magic building between them. Until one nurse asked curiously, "Dr. Russo, is he your patient or your Prince Charming?" She froze mid-folder flip. "He's just a patient." But smiles have a language, and lies told softly have a heartbeat too. Because love stories are never written in ink first. They're written in pulse, breath, and wrong turns on stormy roads.
Lorenzo stayed at the hospital for another full week. Officially, it was for observation. Unofficially, it was because neither he nor Alina was ready for goodbye. Strange how life sometimes holds two strangers together before they even learn the reasons why. The storm had thrown them into each other's orbit, and now the world, calmer, warmer, quieter, was drawing the circle tighter. Each day, Alina found herself walking toward room 308 without thinking. Pulled by curiosity, she tried to label professional and not personal. But hospitals hum with intuition, and her colleagues had already begun whispering about the man whose wounds healed rapidly, but whose eyes followed only one doctor. The staff saw what Alina refused to let herself name: connection, chemistry, and something like a story before beginning. Lorenzo never asked much, but he observed everything. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when trying to hide emotion, the way she spoke softly when tired, the way her brave hands shook when recalling pain. He listened to her stories carefully, memorizing the tone more than the details. She thought he was quiet, but really he was collecting pieces of her heart the way a reader collects lines from a favorite book. One afternoon, she entered while holding his discharge papers. "So, Mafia Prince," she said casually, not expecting the title to carry weight. "You're going home." His brows lifted. "Mafia Prince?" She waved the papers lightly. "It's a joke. The hospital staff likes nicknames for patients who healed too dramatically." He leaned back with a faint smirk. "And what do they call you?" "Me?" "Yes, you." She thought for a moment, then grinned slightly. "The storm surgeon." Lorenzo's smile grew. Not loud, not arrogant, just quietly impressed. "It suits you." She placed the papers near his bed. "You'll need rest. No biking, no rain, no near-death adventures." "I'll miss your lectures," he said softly. "You can call if you crash again." His eyes narrowed playfully. "I plan not to." "You better not. I'm short on sleep and spare hearts." The moment hung in the air, heavier than their banter suggested, because words spoken lightly sometimes echo louder later. "Do you have family picking you up?" she asked more gently. He paused. "Someone will." She noticed the shift, the subtle heaviness in his posture. "Someone you trust?" He looked at her, not answering directly, but saying enough. "Only a few people." Alina nodded slowly, understanding unspoken grief better than scripted explanations. "What about you?" he asked. "Do you have family?" She sat down across from him, finally giving honesty the stage. "My father passed away when I was a teenager. My mother lives outside town, but she works constantly. We see each other a few times a year. It's just me and my sister most of the time." "Sister?" "Sophia, younger than me, too adventurous for her own good." Lorenzo listened carefully. "Seems adventure runs in the family," he said. "Yes, but she got the reckless batch. And you?" "I got the brave one, the kind that saves strangers in storms." Silence again. Lorenzo exhaled. "I wish bravery came with fewer scars." She whispered back without breaking eye contact. "Scars mean you showed up for life." And that line, soft, powerful, emotional, settled between them like destiny signing a document neither had drafted. That evening, a black car arrived for Lorenzo. No license plate, no visible driver at first, tinted windows carrying more authority than identity. When he stepped out, a man emerged, tall, calm, formal,
dressed in a fitted overcoat. He bowed slightly at Lorenzo. "Young master, the council has been informed. They are waiting." Alina, watching from the corridor window, frowned. "Council waiting? Young master? Council of what?" she murmured. Nurses nearby exchanged knowing glances, but no one revealed the truth of him. Not yet. Not now. Lorenzo turned before entering the car, glancing once toward the hospital window where he knew Alina stood even before seeing her silhouette. The storm had brought him life. She had brought him reassessment. And while the Empire was waiting to crown him prince, fate had already crowned her something else. But crowns often come quietly. When he returned home, his family estate, hidden deep in southern territories under guarded rule, Lorenzo stepped into a world of power, silk, authority, and expectation. The DeLuca dynasty was not an ordinary operation. It was the empire of silence that grew louder than bullets, deals that carried more weight than blood, and loyalty that was tested not through affection, but fear. Inside his mansion, advisors crowded around instantly. The Moretti alliance is still possible, but the attempt at your wedding has shaken confidence. Northern families fear instability. They want answers. They want strategy. They want reassurance. They want a prince with iron. They wanted everything that did not resemble Alina. Lorenzo raised his hand. Silence filled the room immediately. A strange gift he had received since childhood, people quieted when he gestured, not because he shouted proficiency, but because danger spoke softly through him. "I need all files on family council members unfiltered. I want names of every person who objected to the Moretti alliance in the past. I want anyone who gains power if the marriage collapses." An advisor hesitated. "Sir, these are your elders." Lorenzo's eyes lifted coldly. "And elders who stab in storms are still assassins." And therefore, investigation began. Meanwhile, Alina tried to return to her normal life in Bellarosa. She resumed hospital shifts. She drank coffee alone. She reviewed patient charts intensely, but the silence no longer held her the same. Because saving a life sometimes plants a memory louder than heartbreak. One evening, while returning home, her phone rang. She didn't know the number. She shouldn't have answered. But Alina Russo had never been a woman who ignored calls. She answered casually, "Hello?" A deep pause, then a familiar, quiet voice murmured, "Storm surgeon?" Her breath froze. "Lorenzo?" Another pause, gentle, amused. "You remembered." She shut the door behind her quietly. "You shouldn't call after discharge. That's against protocol, Prince." She cut herself mid-joke, remembering his reaction last time. Lorenzo chuckled softly. "Prince jokes again. Should I be afraid of your discharge nicknames?" "You should. They're deadly. If I survived the storm, I can take nicknames." Alina breathed a soft laugh this time, comfortable, not defensive. "So, how's Southern recovery going?" "Doctors don't call patients after discharge, against protocol." "You called me first." Lorenzo smiled softly, though only the sound of it traveled through the phone. "And you answered." She paused, heartbeat louder than silence. "Habit," she said, alive, thin as rain. "So is concern," he replied quietly. They spoke for another full hour, light topics, gentle humor, clean romance brewing delicately under unspoken tension. He asked about her garden, she asked about his wrist. He told her the world felt loud after storms. she told him silence can be dangerous too. Neither realized how much of themselves they were giving away slowly, until he asked quietly, "Alina, if you could choose a different life, what would it look like?" She inhaled slow sorrow before answering, "A life where choices are mine. Not debts, not contracts, not alliances, just love, for the sake of love." "And what would your husband be like in that world?" he asked, voice neutral, but heart quietly interrogative. She paused, then said something honest without meaning to. "Someone like you." Silence punched louder than bullets. "Like me?" he repeated softly. "Yes, but maybe less secretive." Another gentle laugh, but silence still tackled the room after comedy. Lorenzo hung up soon after, discharge papers for his heart feeling heavier than council documents. Because affection is harder to investigate than empires. The next morning, Alina returned to the hospital only to find two unfamiliar men waiting in the admin office. Formal suits, calm posture, Eastern accents subtly neutral, but eyes evaluating with silent discipline. "Dr. Russo," one said respectfully, "you saved someone important." "Important?" "A Southern heir to an empire you don't officially need to know." Alina swallowed hard, already sensing danger dissolving peace quietly. "But don't worry," he added. "Your name has not leaked into public files. The attempt was political. You are not a declared target. For now." "For now?" she repeated. The men exchanged glances, then bowed lightly. "Please excuse us, doctor." When the door shut, the nurse beside her whispered knowingly, "So, your prince has territories." Alina exhaled, leaning back. "Apparently, South has more rain than biking safety." "You like rain," the nurse teased. "I like silence more." "You spent an hour talking to silence last night, so maybe husband selection is already destiny primed." Alina didn't smile back this time.
Alina spent the rest of the day in a fog of questions she didn't dare ask aloud. Lorenzo, the quiet man with tired gratitude and gentle smiles, was far from ordinary, and the world protecting his identity only made the truth darker and heavier. Every hallway echo, every unknown number on her phone, every nickname spoken jokingly at the nurse's desk felt sharper now. She tried to steady her mind in professionalism, but something had shifted permanently. Because when love begins in mystery, the revelation doesn't end the feeling, it interrogates it. That night, instead of going straight home, Alina walked to the small chapel behind the hospital, a tiny stone church with stained glass windows washed every time storms visited Bellarosa. The sea sat close enough that even the walls smelled faintly of salt and destiny. Her footsteps echoed on the quiet path as candles flickered softly inside, lighting faces of saints carved in old wood. Unlike council meetings and southern dynasties, the chapel asked nothing of her identity, her bravery, or the man she saved. So she began asking herself instead. She sat on a bench, hands folding tightly, eyes lifting to the window that depicted two wings glowing around a beating heart. Fitting symbolism, she thought. She murmured into the silence, "God, I saved a man whose world could kill me, and whose identity is guarded by men who won't even name it. And yet, my heart doesn't tremble when he looks at me. It trembles when I imagine him leaving." Her voice cracked slightly, not loudly, just enough for the chapel to record the vulnerability. Is that foolishness or fate? The candles answered only with warmth, not confirmation. But stories never need verbal signatures to continue. Lorenzo, meanwhile, had not stopped thinking of her since that phone call. When Alina whispered a life where love was chosen freely, not strategically,
She had unknowingly walked into a story that the Empire had not predicted. Lorenzo sat in his study room that night, the same room where his uncle once coached him to grow sharp, cold, calculated. The walls had seen strategies, negotiations, ambition-driven chess. Yet now, in a dim room of council reports, political fallout, and unresolved betrayal, Lorenzo opened a file that had nothing to do with alliances or territory. It was her patient file. Not supposed to be personal, but the heart is an expert hacker before the mind notices. His fingers brushed the printed document. Alina Russo, MD, neurosurgery specialist. The file detailed her medical education, her training, her awards, her career timeline. He didn't care about titles or achievements. What held his gaze were the small, handwritten annotations at the end, added by a nurse during recovery rounds, a human detail not sanitized from system records. Remarkably brave doctor, sleeps too little, carries spare emergency medical kits, like storms, loves gardens, cares about strangers, the way poets care about endings. Lorenzo's lips curved faintly. A life where love is mine? Just love for the sake of love? He repeated her line again like a vow he had not asked permission to make. She said someone like me, he whispered to himself. Words spoken lightly can sign heavier contracts than mafia councils. The next morning, Bellarosa General received an official governor visitor, a regional state official, publicly declared, calm posture, legal identity fully plated. But two men behind him were the same strangers who bowed in the admin office yesterday, Lorenzo's unnamed shadows. He was coming. Lorenzo didn't ride storms this time. He rode quiet decisions. Alina felt his presence before hearing his steps. She stood at the nurse station checking charts when room 308, now empty, made sense again. His discharge had ended his hospital orbit, but fate hasn't vacated the gravitational papers yet. When she turned, Lorenzo was already near. Not wet, not dying, not anyone. Important and gentle at the same time. He wore a simple, formal coat today. No visible power nods, no mafia uniform signals. Yet danger didn't need branding when it already had posture. "Good morning, storm surgeon," he said softly. She smirked before she could stop her face. "Morning, Prince." She paused, then corrected with a lighter shrug, "Prince of Influence territory." He chuckled gently. "I like that correction. Very legal neutral." "You like legal neutral stuff now?" "I like conversations without debt clauses." She shook her head, amusement flickering carefully. "Well, I told you, you don't owe me anything." He leaned forward slightly, eyes steady but warm. "Even if you didn't ask for repayment, the universe did." She frowned lightly. "What do you mean?"
Lorenzo exhaled slowly, choosing words like a man who has seen guns, but fears metaphors more. "I mean, saving someone important usually gets attention, but I want the one who saved me to choose the spotlight, not inherit it. Swear nothing to debts. Just talk to me like you talked in the storm. Brave, direct, honest." Alina looked at him for a long moment. Then, "You heard me that night?" "I did," he said quietly. "Every word." A blush crept up her face, soft, uninvited, stubborn. The nurse nearby pretended to shuffle paperwork, failing to hide a smile the size of fandom. Romance stories don't need official approval from background characters watching the stage. Lorenzo continued gently. "You asked if I was dangerous. You would have saved me anyway." "We're reviewing old injuries again," she sighed lightly. "I'm reviewing courage," he corrected softly. "And what grade do I get?" "A distinction," he answered immediately. "But sadly, the University of Bravery gives no scholarships for sleep." She laughed, soft but real. "Sir, you really did read books dying." "I read tone dying, words resurrected after discharge."
Silence tucked itself intelligently between them again. "And your world?" she asked softly now. "Is it still dangerous?" "Yes," he said honestly. "And you still came?" "I did." "Why?" Lorenzo paused, then stepped one small inch closer, just enough for cinema to cue slow-burn violin without showing anything explicit. "Because the man you saved that night might have died. The prince I am now, you don't know. But the man asking you for normal conversations, you already met him." Alina looked up, eyes softer, heartbeat louder. "Seems dangerous princes also lecture poetry before noon. Maybe near death I found metaphors more terrifying than guns." She smiled slightly. "Metaphors are messy. So are hearts," he replied gently. "Soft irony for council-raised men. You soften irony, you harden stupidity." "Meaning?" "You make fools brave, and brave men thoughtful." She raised a brow, mischief glinting gently. "Have you personally seen fools turn brave?" "I have. One saved me in a storm." He tapped her folder playfully. "Running on lukewarm coffee and 3 hours of sleep, yet dragged a man double her consequences into the ER without stopping to review his identity tag." Alina's heart leapfrogged protocol boundaries all at once. She didn't answer him with fear. She answered him with presence. "I came to return something," he said softly. Her eyes narrowed curiously. "Return what?" "Your emergency medical kit, the one you left behind in your back seat on the night you stole my pulse from Storms." She blinked. "I didn't steal your pulse, I restarted it." "You restarted more than rhythm," he said quietly. "And what else restarted?" Lorenzo almost smiled before answering. Then sincerity wrestled mischief gently to the ground. "Perspective." Alina felt a soft exhale escape her lips. "Sir, influence territories aside, you talk too poetically for a discharged man." "And you," he countered gently, "operate too fearlessly for someone who wants quiet." She leaned forward slightly, not intimate, just competitive. "Seems we diagnose each other well." "We do," he said quietly, "but patient confidentiality sadly prevents us from billing insurance." "Unfortunately." Another silence, this one warmer. That was the day the staff began to sense. This wasn't a saved life bond anymore. This was story-level gravitational romance. The next evening, Alina received flowers at home for the first time since the storm. No note, no name, just roses wrapped with glowing baby's breath and a small tag attached that said, "No debts, just destiny doing delivery rounds." She laughed softly to herself before tracing a fingertip over the petals. Soft, careful, tender. She whispered toward the empty wind, "Poets are excessive." Then quieter, "But maybe destiny is too." But destiny sometimes sends princes who refuse to be invoices, and sometimes sends invoices disguised as roses with no purchase receipt. Lorenzo stood in his warehouse that night, not the warehouse where people die, but a warehouse where people plan their resurrection. He looked up toward the highway he had crashed on, the mist still lingering, but the storm clouds no longer roaring. Somewhere in that silence, a doctor had pulled him to life without asking for identity clauses, alliance promises, or spotlight inheritance rights. That doctor now held her own heart hostage without realizing a prince was also watching. Because destiny writes contracts quietly, but love edits them later. Alina told herself she didn't want to know who Lorenzo truly was. But curiosity is a quiet thief, especially when the heart has already opened its doors. The southern shadows that visited the hospital had warned her carefully, insisting that his identity was not something an ordinary civilian needed access to. Yet few things in Alina's life had ever followed the path of ordinary, no matter how badly she tried to convince herself otherwise. So naturally, she began searching, not for truth, but for contradictions. Because maybe if she found something imperfect, something cruel, something disqualifying, she could convince her heart to step back into safety. Instead, she found danger wearing manners. Over the next several days, whispers spread through Bellarosa. Not gossip this time, but speculation powered by uncomfortably real observations. The black car that had retrieved him carried no license. The men who protected his name carried no job titles. His access to hospital admin data had been too smooth. His discharge paperwork cleared too rapidly. His posture too unbothered for someone who should still fear rain, injuries, or mortal limitations. And though the hospital had referred to him jokingly as a Mafia Prince among staff banter, it was now starting to feel less like humor and more like foreshadowing. Alina couldn't escape it anymore. But fate had not written explicit scenes, just explicit tension. The flowers had arrived again, this time lilies mixed with white roses. Still no note, though a folded piece of paper sat beneath the bouquet, not hidden but not highlighted either. When she opened it carefully, the handwriting looked almost hesitant, uncharacteristic of the Lorenzo she knew, a man who spoke controlled irony and calm poetry, a man who carved decisions on sunset terraces and stormy roads without needing confirmation twice. When storms stop roaring, brave hearts echo instead. But echoing shouldn't hurt the one who did never ask for noise in the first place. She exhaled slowly, absorbing it. He wasn't confessing love yet, he was confessing impact. She felt it, clearly. She hated it, just slightly. She liked it too, tragically. That evening, she walked into the garden of her small coastal home again, roses blooming softly beneath sunset hues that had begun to resemble the terrace lighting she once shared with him during discharge paper banter. Her sister Sophia watched her silently from the porch, noticing the way Alina had begun holding flowers not like decorative gifts, but like evidence in an unsolved heart court case. "You're staring at them like they committed emotional malpractice," Sophia teased gently. Alina exhaled. "They're just flowers, excessively dramatic ones." "They're not dramatic. Your face is dramatic when receiving them. The flowers are innocent. You're interrogating witnesses who don't speak." Alina narrowed her eyes. "You're too young to diagnose love." "I don't need a medical degree," Sophia smirked playfully. "I have eyesight and instincts." Alina glanced at her. "Instincts are dangerous. So are men retrieved in black cars with invisible job titles." Sophia countered calmly. Alina froze. Sophia understood the silence. She always did. Alina shifted slightly, voice dropping. "What if he's not who I think he is?" "You don't think anything. That's the problem. You feel something before checking the identity of it." "And if what I feel could kill me?" Sophia shrugged lightly. "Then we bury stupidity, not love." Alina exhaled a quiet laugh. "You're reckless. And you're brave. Storm surgeon who saves princes without checking whether their pulse belongs to a biker, a poet, or a southern dynasty." Alina glanced away, heart thudding painfully. "His world is dangerous." Sophia stepped closer. "Then ask yourself this, doctor. Does danger look at everyone the way he looks at you, or only the ones destiny handed a medical kit to?" The silence settled. This one louder, because love sometimes speaks through absence. Lorenzo returned to his world too. But this time, destiny didn't accompany him only through gratitude. It followed him through eyes that had now grown heavier, thoughtful, softer, eyes that were unintentionally comparing empire directives with storm surgeon metaphors. His uncle was still under house arrest, stripped of authority, but not stripped from the narrative timeline entirely, because removing a counselor from power didn't remove his ambition from consequences, and consequences in mafia empires aren't written in documents. They're written in silence first and retaliation later. Lorenzo knew, and he now feared silence for one specific reason only: her name. He was guarded by shadows, but she was guarded by fate. And the shadows didn't like fate's unfiltered interference. One evening, Lorenzo walked into the DeLuca warehouse, the same warehouse councilmen once used as headquarters for loyalty negotiations and territory strategies. His advisor stood near large containers of goods awaiting southern export: silk, jewelry, imported textiles, premium wine crates, and other luxuries that didn't publicly declare empire association, but carried influence across monetized corridors nonetheless. "Sir," one of the advisors murmured, "the northern families are reevaluating alliances, but your reputation is changing." "What reputation?"
Lorenzo asked coolly. "Your kindness is becoming public hearsay. Family council members suspected. Rivals smell leadership distraction. Some circles call it weakness. And others? They call it growth before coronation. But mafia dynasties dislike pre-marriage soft edits on hearts." Lorenzo clenched his jaw. "Showers have rehab for wounds, not for hearts." "Actually, sir," the advisor responded softly, "storms have rehab. You nearly died in one." "Yes," Lorenzo whispered, eyes narrowing, "and someone fearless restarted both rhythm and reconsideration in the emergency corridor of influence territory." The advisor frowned slightly. "You mean that doctor?" "Doctor who called me Prince Charming before discharge," he corrected quietly, remembering the one moment she had almost said it casually before filtering her own truth. "Sir, with respect," the advisor continued calmly, "public identity leaks are dangerous, and holes in dynasty loyalty are worse." Silence. Because empire discussions don't scream back, they strike back. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor for Alina, but this time it wasn't her patient or poetry disguised in flowers. A formal letter arrived from a Northern Alliance family, the Moretti clan, publicly influential, socially powerful, and historically rooted in legal shipping operations, industrial trade, and prestige territory expansions. Unlike DeLuca's, their empire didn't hide in shadows. It paraded in boardrooms and societal charity galas. The letter was simple, respectful, professionally worded. "Dr. Alina Russo, your bravery has earned attention beyond Bellarosa. Some circles wish services from someone whose hands remain steady in storms, but whose heart stays unsettable by fear or reputation." Sophia, reading over her shoulder, whistled. "Oh, great, a second prince. Now Destiny is doing double admissions." Alina rolled her eyes. "It's not destiny. It's influence territory politics disguised as opportunities." "And you hate it?" "I hate nothing I can solve with sleep." "But sleep doesn't solve southern discharge phone calls." Sophia teased again. Alina froze again. She shouldn't like the mystery, but everything about him stayed quietly defiant to fatal endings. The next hospital shift felt uncomfortably normal, but then destiny enjoys irony. Lorenzo walked into the hospital again that evening, not through emergency entrance, not through admin corridors,
just through glass door legality, like any other socially influential patient visitor. He stepped in wearing formal neutrality, coat still elegant, but presence disturbingly human for someone whose world Alina now suspected rather than officially knew. And when his eyes lifted to hers again, Alina realized she wasn't afraid of the empire. She was afraid of losing the man behind it. "Visiting again? Against protocol?" she asked gently. "Protocol forbids staff billing hearts for revival, but not visiting the storm surgeon who said I could live." "And if I hadn't said you'd live?" she countered softly. "Then destiny reschedules survival instead." Alina's lips curved gently. She didn't know answers yet, but she knew presence. The kind that stays after storms despite territory leadership suspicions, despite public reputation politics, despite alliances objecting to softness before coordination, despite family betrayal wounds carrying permission clauses heavier than romance confessions. She saved a stranger, and the stranger now saved every silence she feared speaking aloud. Alina had always believed that love stories were soft, predictable, graceful things. Quiet moments, shy confessions, gentle beginnings, slow endings. But life was currently proving her definition naive in the most cinematic way possible. Because the day she pulled a dying stranger from a storm-soaked highway, something far more powerful than romance had opened its eyes with him. And now, every moment between them felt gentle in emotion, yet sharp in consequence. She tried, she truly did, to treat Lorenzo like any other recovering patient who shouldn't stay in her mind after discharge. But he had become the one neurological disorder she didn't want cured. And fate was laughing quietly in the background, like an unpaid scriptwriter who worked on passion projects only. Lorenzo was recovering fully now. His wounds healed neatly under the attention of some of the best private doctors South could afford. But wounds donated by bullets, betrayal, or storms mend far easier than a heart that was still trying to categorize affection into harmless labels. He returned to room 308 again that evening, not unconscious like the night she saved him, but conscious in emotion, calm in posture, sharp in eyes, and gentle in intention. His visits had become more frequent, less professional, more quiet, more deliberate. Alina was reviewing charts at the nursing station when she felt the shift in atmospheric pressure. She always sensed him before seeing him. Maybe doctors trained in storms cannot unlearn premonitions disguised as instincts. "You keep appearing like misplaced royalty in medical corridors," she teased softly. "Royalty is noisy. I prefer anonymity with flowers." Alina exhaled a laugh, shaking her head gently. "Flowers are still noisy, just emotionally scented." "Only a problem," he said quietly, leaning slightly toward her, "if the recipient treats them like evidence." "And should I destroy evidence?" she countered playfully. "No," he replied with instant sincerity. "Just stop hiding from it." The silence after his words felt louder than the storm that nearly killed him. Alina didn't look up this time. She knew hiding didn't require eye contact. Love stories sometimes receive confirmation not through gazes, but through tension that refuses to blink. Her colleague, Nurse Ella, leaned slightly closer with a teasing smirk. "Doctor, are we discharging this man or diagnosing him?" "We're diagnosing escape attempts from protocol," Alina answered immediately. "So he escapes only towards neurosurgery wing," Ella teased. "Not cardiology." "Cardiology is for heartbeat patients. I suffered storm injury, not heart injury," Lorenzo interrupted quietly. "Except storms caused by love still attack the heart first." "Well," Lorenzo lifted a hand respectfully, "I survived the first attack. The second attack," Ella said dramatically, "has no survival rate." Alina exhaled slowly. "Someone needs sleep." "And someone needs honesty," exclaimed Sophia, walking into the corridor, as if entering the script without permission, because apparently sisters never ask for narrative timing cues either. Lorenzo looked at her, then back at Alina, faint amusement flickering. "She interrupts mic drops too?" "She ruins emotional suspense for sport," Alina sighed lightly. "I prefer suspense unfinished," he responded gently, then finished incorrectly. Alina swallowed quietly. I don't even know your world, your territory, your influence, your empire. Then let ignorance keep you safe until knowledge is earned gently, not inherited violently or politically framed. Alina frowned lightly. Knowledge isn't earned through secrecy. Knowledge isn't earned through storms either, he countered gently. Yet you extracted it from blood-soaked asphalt anyway. Maybe romance earns its knowledge quietly, Doctor, not through introductions, but emergencies. Their eyes met again. Just slightly. Momentarily. Romance stories don't need to kiss. They need to collide with destiny, professionally cloned tension.
That night, Alina didn't drive straight home. She walked into the chapel again, hoping quiet corners could clarify emotional contradictions that refused to file themselves into safe categories. Lorenzo may rule a southern empire, but the chapel ruled storms, candles, stained glass metaphors, and vows written in the language of people who feared nothing except losing something beautiful after saving it. She sat again on the bench, whispering into the candle glow. If his world could kill me, why do his words make me feel safer than silence? If his identity is dangerous, why does destiny feel louder every time he says my name? What if the prince is real? What if love made him human first and mafia last? Candles don't answer questions. They approve them through warmth. But warmth doesn't fix betrayal. The next day, North objected again, but South arrived quietly, because shadows are patient until coronation gets marriage rights. A regional Moretti counselor visited the hospital that afternoon, an older, elegant woman dressed in black silk and pearls, carrying posture only influence dynasties inherit socially. She approached Alina quietly but professionally. Dr. Russo, you saved someone important, but important men come with territories that expect invoices. Love shouldn't invoice itself into a world that didn't sign medical releases. Alina frowned lightly. Medical releases are for wounds, not hearts. Dynasty releases apply to everything, she said smoothly. Even moments begun hopelessly on highways. Alina swallowed tightly. Why does everyone keep whispering the same warning without naming his empire? The counselor hesitated slightly, then replied quietly. Because empires unnamed can still kill identities that ask too much before coronation. Some spotlights collapse dynasties, others restart heartbeats. You restarted one, but northern councils want confirmation clauses in blood, not revival. Alina clenched her fists, breath slow but voice steady. Then love better not inherit northern stupidity or southern secrecy. It better inherit choice. No one chooses princes who nearly die, she corrected gently. Fate chooses strangers who revive them anyway. Then hearts pretend blindness was bravery afterward. Silence. Because warnings repeated in silky form are still warnings. When Lorenzo called again that evening, she answered, against logic, but not against destiny. Hello? She whispered softly. Storm surgeon, his voice greeted gently. You didn't bill me yet. She exhaled. Because protocol forbids billing hearts revived in storms. Who revived yours, then? He asked quietly. Alina froze. Did love really commit malpractice without medical permissions? Or did destiny reassign a patient into husband criteria before charts were filed? You did, she answered softly. Lorenzo didn't breathe for a moment, then whispered back, Then I better survive the second attack too. Alina swallowed quietly. You will, because this time, I want you to. And that was the moment the warehouse of her heart officially stopped searching for safety secondhand, because safety wasn't a location, identity, empire, or black car arrival gesture. It was a person who survived storms and metaphors equally. Alina never imagined that a single night of rain and a wrongly dialed phone call could rewrite the story her life followed. She had once believed that destiny worked in gentle whispers, but now she knew better. Destiny didn't whisper, it intercepted, it redirected. It chose its characters on stormy roads where survival looked meaningless and love looked impossible. Lorenzo Moretti had not entered her life through intention. He had entered through bleeding, silence, thunder, and a kind of helplessness that made hearts reckless with mercy. She had saved a stranger, unknowingly crowning a prince. And in doing so, her own story had been betrothed into an empire long before she ever learned its name. Lorenzo was no longer the wounded man in room 308. He was healed now, physically whole, emotionally present. The doctors had done their work, but Alina had done something medical degrees couldn't trademark. She had given him a reason not just to live, but to return. And return he did. Not loudly, not arrogantly, not like the Northern Council feared, but quietly, like a man who understood that love deserved diplomacy, not fear. The hospital corridor had grown used to him. Nurses knew his footsteps. Staff sensed the emotional weather he carried. Patients didn't know him, but the air did. Even the buildings seemed to adjust their atmosphere when he passed, as though respect was structural, not optional. He appeared in tailored coats, holding composure like a birthright, yet offering smiles only 2 sisters and 1 storm surgeon had ever been permitted to witness involuntarily. Alina was working late again when he stopped beside her desk. The fluorescent lights made him look less like a Mafia Prince and more like a man fate treated as a limited edition prototype. "Doctor," he said softly, "your hospital keeps fixing my wounds but worsens the condition of my curiosity." Alina didn't look up immediately, pretending that pausing her heartbeat was more professional than examining him mid-sentence. "Curiosity is contagious," she murmured. Still reading. "We don't isolate it here." "Should you?" he countered gently. "Only if the symptoms involve speeding and gunshot injuries." He smirked faintly. "And if the symptoms involve you? Then it becomes a chronic case," she answered, finally lifting her eyes. Their gazes held, not dramatically, just truthfully, because love that begins in storms doesn't need theatrical cues anymore. It simply needs honesty stronger than fear and softer than blood. Sophia entered, arms crossed with a victorious grin. "Finally! Part 6 confessions without dragging North into paperwork." Lorenzo raised his brows. "She narrates interruptions too?" "She competes with destiny for attention," Alina sighed. "Impossible," he replied gently, eyes still on Alina. "Destiny saved me through her hands first." Sophia blinked, mock insulted. "And I was hoping it was my excellent emotional support delivery service." But behind every joke there was a truth the Northern Council hated. The Moretti Empire might be dangerous, but the man himself was learning to be gentle by medical association. Lorenzo stepped slightly closer, voice firm but warm. "You once asked about my world. Let me give you the only piece of information that matters." She waited. Heartbeat paused. Breath neutral, eyes soft. "You saved someone destined to protect you, not collect you." Alina swallowed. Maybe that was the most romantic threat a Mafia Prince could ever offer cleanly. But protection promises don't survive untested. And empires don't bow unless love proves more powerful than inheritance. The Northern Council summoned Lorenzo again that night, but this time, Alina knew. She wasn't ignorant of his world anymore. She was emotionally enrolled without signature. She stood beside the fountain outside the hospital when the black Moretti SUV arrived. This time, the suits didn't intimidate her. Their silence did. Their restraint. Their awareness that the woman fate had chosen was someone Lorenzo himself was now trying to keep alive twice, once medically, once emotionally. He stepped into the car but paused, turning back to her. That pause carried more weight than years of rain. "A wedding of fate was signed the day you stopped a storm from finishing me," he said quietly. "But a wedding of love waits for choice." "And what does choice say?" Alina asked softly. Lorenzo smiled, the smallest smile that carried the biggest vow.
that I want the bride to be safe in heart before empire in spotlight. That was not a threat. That was a vow. But vows invite enemies when empires don't approve brides chosen from highways.
The next evening, Alina was pulled into the actual Moretti world, not as ransom, but revelation. Lorenzo asked her to meet him at the old Moretti warehouse, the same one where guns were stored and debts were decided. She arrived cautiously, but not fearfully. Storms had trained her better. She stepped inside, the building vast but quiet, echoing old transactions in unspoken power. Lorenzo stood there waiting, not with guards, not with shadows, not with counsels, just with sincerity. "You know what this place decides," she whispered softly. "Yes," he replied, "debts or destinies." She exhaled. "And mine?" "Was chosen here the night you dialed the wrong call, yet answered the right voice." She frowned lightly. "You keep calling destiny a patient experience." "I was your patient." "And now?" "Now, I wish to be your emergency." Silence again. The kind that changes futures without signatures. But before love could finalize itself, danger returned in the form of choice-stealing violence. A gunshot echoed outside. Not for Lorenzo, for Alina, because enemies attack the heart healer first, the one who gives princes reasons not to die. Lorenzo didn't hesitate this time. He moved faster than the bullet, shielding her in a breathless moment that carried no adult content, only pure instinct. He gripped her arms, pulling her inside and closing the warehouse door behind them, the echo of the attempt still lingering. "You see," she tried smiling, even through the shock, "maybe curiosity should be isolated in your world." "No," he replied sharply but sincerely, eyes intense. "Just the threats trying to separate us should be." Alina's smile softened. "You just blocked gunfire. That was noisy protection." "And yet," he countered softly, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek, "I still haven't made the loudest vow." "What vow?" she whispered. Lorenzo bent slightly toward her, voice warm, sincere, steady, fatal in romance, not violence. "That the storm saved my life the first time, but you saved it the second, and now I choose to guard the person who gave me both saves." That second attack had a survival rate after all, because Lorenzo Moretti was no longer just the Mafia Prince. He was a man who learned rescue language from a woman who never signed up for empire, but did sign up for saving strangers intuitively. Alina exhaled slowly, heart quiet but certain. "Well then, Prince Lorenzo." He raised a brow. "If I belong anywhere now—" He waited. "It's your story, not your empire." Lorenzo smiled again, that small but world-shifting smile.